Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our council meeting of September 12th. And I'll call the meeting to order today. Before we move on with the agenda, though, I would like to take a moment and just acknowledge the passing late last week of Queen Elizabeth II, our Queen of Canada, for over 70 plus years of dedicated and unwavering service. So if you're able, please join me in a moment of quiet reflection just to recognize her many years of service. Thank you. So the first item on our agenda this afternoon is, of course, to adopt our agenda. And I have a recommendation here that the agenda for the September 12th, 2022 regular meeting of council be accepted and passed as amended. Could I get a mover and a seconder for that, please? Moved by Steve, seconded by Dan. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. We'll just go around the room, virtual and real, for disclosure of pecuniary interest. I have none to declare on anything on today's agenda. Councillor Yake?
No.
Councillor Burke?
Yes. 2A, B, C, and E. Yeah, so Appendix A on all of these was prepared by my employer.
Just A, B, and E, did you say?
A, B, C, and E.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Hearn, do you have anything to declare?
No.
Councillor McCabe?
I have none.
Okay, thank you. So when we get to those items that Councillor Burke has, we'll pull those out and deal with them separately. Okay, so the next item on our agenda, of course, is to recess our council meeting to move into a public meeting for planning matters. We have some minor variances and a zoning bylaw amendment. And so we have a recommendation here that the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Wellington North recess the September 12th, 2022 regular meeting of council for the purpose of holding a public meeting under the Planning Act for Roy Syrah, minor variance, Edgar and Lena Sauter, minor variance, Stephen Clark, minor variance, and a housekeeping zoning bylaw amendment. Can I get a mover and a seconder for that, please? Moved by Sherry, seconded by Lisa. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. So we'll switch over to the Committee of Adjustment. First, we have 3 applications to deal with this afternoon, and I'll call the Committee of Adjustment meeting to order and ask if there's any disclosure of pecuniary interest in any items on this agenda. Councillor Hearn.
No.
Councillor McCabe.
None.
Councillor Burke.
No.
Councillor Yake.
No.
Okay, thank you. First item is to deal with the minutes of our previous meeting, which was August 29th. And the recommendation is that the Committee of Adjustment meeting minutes of August 29th, 2022, application A17/22 be adopted as presented. Could I get a mover and a seconder for that, please? Moved by Dan, seconded by Sherry. Any discussion on those minutes? Okay, all those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Our first application, A18/22, is for Roy R. Syrah. I hope I've pronounced that right, sir.
Yes, you have.
Okay, And the location of the subject property is described as Plan 61M 241, Lot 24, and is municipally known as 152 Walsh Street, Arthur. The property is approximately 0.5 hectares in size, and location of the property is shown on the map in your package. Purpose and effect of the application is to provide relief from the minimum width requirements for proposed private garage. The proposed variance will permit a reduced width of 5.18 meters, whereas the bylaw requires a minimum width of 6 meters. Other variances may be considered where deemed appropriate. How was notice given for this public meeting?
Notices were mailed to property owners within 60 meters of the subject property and as well as to the applicable agencies. Signage was posted on the property on August 18th, 2022.
Okay, thank you. Matthew, I see you popped up on my screen. Are you giving us the report on this application?
Yes, sir. So thank you, and through you, Chair. Before you today is a minor variance application to provide relief from the minimum width for a private garage. The applicant is proposing to add an additional residential unit in the basement and requires a permanent parking space. So the applicant is proposing to make use of the existing 17-foot width-wise garage, whereas the bylaw requires 19.6 feet. Planning staff have no concerns with the application as the request is minor and meets the intent of the official plan and zoning bylaw amendment, and I welcome any questions.
Great, thank you. Has any further correspondence been received in respect to this application?
No, there's been no further correspondence received.
Okay, thank you. Anyone wishing notice of the decision must request the decision, must submit a written request to the Secretary Treasurer of the Committee of Adjustment. And with that said, I'll open the floor for any questions or comments from the applicant and or the public. Do we have anyone registered to speak on this application, Karen?
No, we do not.
Okay. Did I see we have the applicant with us? Did you want to make any comments at this time, Mr. Sarah?
No, I just wanted to make sure that, everything's done by code. I just want to make sure that the fire is safe and everything was good. I'm a young adult, 25 years old, first home, so I just want to make sure everything goes, safe and secure.
Okay, thank you. So we don't have any other?
No, we
Okay.
do not.
So we'll move on to questions or comments from the committee. Anything from committee members on this application?
No.
Councillor McCabe?
I'd just say, welcome to Wellington North and to Arthur, and nice to see that you're adding a rental unit. It's much needed in the town.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We'll move right to the decision then. So the decision reads as follows: that the minor variance applied for an application A18/22 for the property described as Plan 61M 241 Lot 24 with a civic address of 152 Walsh Street, Arthur, to provide the following relief. Number one, that a reduced width of 5 meters be permitted for an existing private garage to allow for an additional permanent parking space for an additional residential unit in the basement, whereas the bylaw requires 6 meters. All those in favor? That's approved. Thank you.
Thank you.
So we'll move on to our next application. This is application A19/22 for Edgar and Lena Sauter. The location of the subject property is described as Part Lot 7, Concession 6 South, and is municipally known as 9369 Concession 6 North. The property is approximately 19.6 hectares in size. Location of the property is shown on the map in your package. Purpose and effect of the application is to provide relief from section 6.29.2C of the zoning bylaw, which states that an additional dwelling unit detached shall be located in an accessory structure. The applicant is proposing to construct a standalone 1,100 square foot residential dwelling. Proposed dwelling is required to meet all other accessory structure provisions in section 6.1. Other variances may be considered where deemed appropriate. How was notice given for this public meeting?
Notices were mailed to property owners within 60 meters and as well as to the applicable agencies. Signage was posted on the property on September 1st, 2022.
Great, thank you. Matthew, I guess we're back over to you.
Sir, thank you through you, Chair. Before you is a minor variance application to provide relief from section 629(2)(c) of the zoning bylaw, which states that a detached additional dwelling unit shall be located in an accessory structure. So the applicant is proposing to construct an 1,100 square foot standalone residential dwelling under the additional dwelling unit provisions. So planning staff note that the proposed new dwelling does meet all other ADU provisions as well as accessory structure provisions. Further, the proposed dwelling unit is smaller than the existing home on the property. So with that said, planning staff have no concerns with the application as the request meets the 4 tests for the minor variance. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Has any further correspondence been received in respect to this application?
Yes, after the agenda was put together and posted, we received correspondence from the Saugeen Valley Conservation Authority dated September 8th, 2022, and they find the application acceptable.
Okay, thank you. Any persons wishing to be notified of the decision must submit a written request to the Secretary Treasurer. And with that said, I'll open the floor for any questions or comments from the applicant and or the public. Do we have,
You want to speak?
okay,
They may have some questions for you. though. Okay, that's fine.
so for those of you who are in the meeting remotely, we have the applicant here in the room with us.
Oh.
And will be available to answer any questions that we might have. Did we have anyone else registered to speak on this application? We didn't, okay. So, and you didn't want to say anything particular?
Not necessarily, we just wish to have home there. Yeah, we applied for a new septic system. And the guy said it's supposed to be 50 feet away from the well, and we're 100 feet, so. And we're within 180 feet of the existing house. So I think we're trying to stay within the rules and regulations.
Okay. Thank you. Do we have any questions or comments from committee members? Councillor Hearn.
Not really a question. I think that was Edgar speaking. I couldn't really hear him very well. I was just wondering if you could speak up a little bit more. Sorry.
Yeah, sorry about that. We did all the things we were required to. We were asked to have a weeping bed put in. So we did a soil sample and they said to stay away 50 feet and we're 100 feet from the well. And the soil there is very sandy and pit run, but we still have to wait to hear back from the test. And we're supposed to stay within 200 feet of the existing house, and it's 180 feet. So yeah, we're looking forward to having a new home.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from committee members? Okay, then we'll move right to the decision, and the decision will read as follows. That the minor variance applied for in application A19/22 for the property described as part lot 7, concession 6 south, with a civic address of 9369 concession 6 north, to provide the following relief. Number 1, that a standalone additional dwelling unit detached be permitted, whereas the bylaw requires an additional dwelling unit detached to be located in an accessory structure. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. So that's approved. And we will move on to our final minor variance application today. That's application A20/22 for Stephen Clark. The location of the subject property is described as West Luther Concession 6, part lot 9, registered plan 61R 21154, parts 2 and 3, and is municipally known as 8920 Wellington Road 16, Damascus. The property is approximately 0.53 hectares in size, and location is shown on the map in your package. Purpose and effect of the application is to provide relief from the maximum height for an accessory structure. The applicants are proposing to construct a new detached garage with a height of 6.24 meters. Other variances may be considered where deemed appropriate. How was notice given for this public meeting?
Notices were mailed to property owners within 60 meters and to the applicable agencies. Signage was posted on the property on August 25th, 2022.
Great, thank you. Matthew, coming back to you for a report on this one.
Yep. Last but not least, through you, Chair, this minor variance application is looking to provide relief from the minimum height for an accessory structure. The applicant is proposing to construct a new 2,400 square foot detached garage with the height of 6.24 feet. Yeah, I think I have that right here. Make sure. The applicant has indicated the garage is a walkout style, and due to the grade change on the subject lands, a variance is required. So planning staff have no concerns as the request meets the 4 tests for a minor variance, and I welcome any questions.
Okay, thank you. Has any further correspondence been received in respect to this application?
Nothing that isn't listed on the agenda.
Okay, thank you. Any persons wishing to be notified of the decision must submit a written request to the Secretary Treasurer. And with that, I'll open the floor for any questions or comments from the applicant and or the public. Did we have anyone registered to speak on this application?
Steve Clark has been moved into the meeting, but his camera and mic is off. So I don't know, Steve, if you wanted to speak to this.
Hello.
Hi, Steve. Go ahead if you'd like.
No, I'm just here to address any opposition if there is any. So, yeah, what we're doing is we're just matching the same height of the house, single story at the front and walk-out basement towards the back. So it'll just be the back that exceeds the height requirements.
Okay, thank you. Any questions or comments from committee members? I'm here.
Nope.
Okay. So I'm just a little puzzled, Steve. So I'm going to ask you with regard to, so you're having the garage, like the vehicle storage at the upper level and then something else at the lower level. Is that the way I understand it?
A 2-story garage, more or less. You can enter from the top or the bottom. So.
Oh, I see. Okay. I just didn't quite understand how it was going to work. So appreciate that because the grade there is a little uneven.
It's quite a hill there, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Any other questions or comments from committee? Okay, then we'll move right to the decision. And it reads as follows: that the minor variance applied for an application A20/22 for the property described as West Luther Concession 6, Part Lot 9, registered plan 61R 21154, Parts 2 and 3, and municipally known as 8920 Wellington Road 16, Damascus, to provide the following relief. Number one, that an increased height of 6.24 meters be permitted for a proposed detached garage where the bylaw allows for 4.57 meters. All those in favor? That's approved. Thank you. And that completes our Committee of Adjustment applications. So I have a recommendation here that the Committee of Adjustment meeting of September 12th, 2022 be adjourned at 2:19 p.m. Could I get a mover and a seconder for that, please? Moved by Sherry, seconded by Steve. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. We're adjourned from Committee of Adjustment. We'll move now to the public meeting with regard to the zoning bylaw amendment. And with that, I will call the public meeting to order and ask if there's any disclosure of pecuniary interest with regard to this application. This is a housekeeping application, zoning bylaw amendment for the township. Councillor Yake.
No.
Councillor Burke.
No.
Councillor McCabe.
I have none.
Councillor Hearn.
No.
And I have none as well. So location of the subject land, in this case, the proposed amendment affects multiple properties in the Township of Wellington North. A map has not been provided since multiple properties are affected. Purpose and effect of the application or of the proposed amendment is to, number one, remove hotel as a permitted use within the central commercial C1 zone. Presently, the zoning bylaw permits hotel uses in the central commercial zone. And number two, revise the accessory residential use regulations within the central commercial zone, C1, and highway commercial zone C2, and neighborhood commercial C3 zones to prohibit accessory residential uses on the ground floor of a commercial building. Presently, the zoning bylaw permits that 49% of the rear portion of the ground floor of a commercial building may be used for accessory residential uses. How was notice given for this public meeting?
Notices were mailed to the applicable agencies and posted in the Wellington Advertiser on August 18th, 2022.
Thank you. And Matthew, can you give us a bit of a explanation here?
Sure, gladly. So again, through you, Chair, before you today is a zone amendment for specifically a housekeeping amendment to refine the permitted uses and the accessory residential regulations in the C1, C2, and C3 zones specifically. So council may recall the last housekeeping in 2022, May 2022, sorry. So we're keeping through really day-to-day usage of the document, as well as consultation with township staff to keep the bylaw as accurate and user-friendly as possible. So with that said, the first notable change is the removal of hotel as a permitted use within the C1 zone. The proposed change would align with the vision of the county official plan. And for the most part, C1 zones are located within the central business district, designated areas in the OP, which seeks to serve the needs of pedestrian-oriented traffic as opposed to the traveling public. Further, as mentioned with the C1 zones being in the heart of urban centers, the subject lands are typically smaller in size, which do pose zoning issues specifically around parking for hotel uses. So as noted in my report, hotels will remain a permitted use within the highway commercial C2 zones. So second and sort of, I guess, last notable change here is planning staff are proposing to remove the accessory residential uses within the C1, C2, and C3 zones to prohibit accessory residential uses on the ground floor of a commercial building. So council may be familiar with the bylaw's current provisions, which permit that 49% of the rear portion of a ground floor of a commercial building may be used as accessory residential. The proposed change will ensure that commercial uses do remain the primary use in commercial zones. And planning staff note that the proposed change would still permit residential units above commercial uses as of right. So just to wrap up, a final bylaw has been brought for council's consideration this afternoon, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Matthew. Has any further correspondence been received in respect to this application?
Nothing that isn't listed on and included in the agenda package.
Great, thank you. Anyone wishing notice of the decision, the bylaw will be considered at the regular council meeting following the public meeting. So persons wishing the notice for the passing of the bylaw must submit a written request. With that, I will open the floor for any questions or comments from the public. Do we have anyone registered to speak on this application? Okay, so we'll move right to then questions or comments from council. Any questions or comments from council? Councilor Yake?
Matthew, I just wanted to clarify the 49% on the rear portion, the ground floor, is that being removed or is it still there?
So through you, Chair, the proposed sort of housekeeping bylaw amendment would remove that 49% residential portion and ultimately bring commercial only on the main floor is what we're looking at.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor McCabe, I think I saw you with a hand up.
Yeah, and through you, Mayor, just a kind of a quick, I guess, thought. So this is kind of getting it out of the downtown, which I think is great. For more than one reason. I think probably hotels should be at either the periphery of the towns, like as you're coming into town from north, south, east, or west. But this must have to do a little bit with parking as well. Would that be fair?
Yes, through you, Chair. That's an excellent point. And yes, so like I said, in the downtown core, we're finding that these C1 lots are a lot smaller. So
Yep.
when, the hotel uses are coming, we're finding that there's a lot of constraints when it comes to parking being one of the main deterrents.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments from council? I think it's pretty important when we talk about the main floor provisions too, that we preserve that commercial space in our downtown cores. I think the majority of people believe our downtown core is really a heart of our communities, and we want to encourage commercial there as much as we possibly can, even though there is so much pressure on the need for residential. So I think this is a good change that will make sure that we preserve that commercial space, because we certainly do have a lot more pressure on commercial needs than we did even a few years ago, with far fewer empty storefronts than we had in the past. So I think this is appropriate for the time we're in. Any other final comments or questions? Okay, then the only thing we have left for the public meeting then is adjournment. I have a recommendation here that the public meeting of September 12th, 2022 be adjourned at 2:27 p.m. Could I get a mover and a seconder for that recommendation, please, Sherry? And Dan, thank you. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. So we're adjourned from our public meeting. We'll switch back to our council meeting and resume our regular meeting of council. I have a recommendation here that the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Wellington North resume the September 12th, 2022 regular meeting of council at 2:27 p.m. Can I get a mover and a seconder for that, please? Moved by Steve, seconded by Lisa. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. So we'll deal with the bylaw coming out of the public meeting right away.
I just wanted to note in that resolution, the bylaw number should say 10322, not 022.
Okay. It's right on my sheet here, so.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Okay, so we'll move on to the bylaw coming out of that public meeting. And so the recommendation is as follows, that the bylaw number 103-22 being a bylaw to amend bylaw 66-01 being a zoning bylaw for the Township of Wellington North, be read a first, second, and third time and enacted. Could I get a mover and a seconder for that, please? Moved by Sherry, seconded by Dan. Any final discussion on that? Okay, all those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. We'll move on to adoption of the minutes of council and public meeting. And we have a recommendation that the minutes of the regular meeting of council and the public meeting held on August 29th, 2022 be adopted as circulated. Can I get a mover and a seconder for that, please? Moved by Steve, seconded by Dan. Thank you. Any questions or comments on those minutes? All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. We go back to our business arising from previous meetings of council, and this is the Mount Forest Pool Replacement report. I'm not sure that we have a lot to discuss on this today because we're kind of waiting on some information, but I will open the floor for anybody who would like to have some discussion on this. Okay, not seeing any takers. Oh, Steve, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, Mayor. Just before the Fall Fair parade. Dan and I were having a bit of a side chat, and we don't need an answer right now, but he put a bug in my ear, and we were talking about what would be the amount that would be needed or required to have naming rights on this pool. And I know we don't know the price of the options that are available to us right now, but it's just something to keep occupy our mind, if nothing else will, about this pool. It's I think it's important, and I think there's a lot of people in this community and a lot of companies that are in this community that would be interested in hearing what that procedure would be to name the pool or part of the pool, and what that would cost them, and then how long the duration would be that they would have that naming rights as well. So just something to think about.
Okay. Karen?
Staff were directed to prepare a sponsorship policy that would deal with those kinds of things, and we're still reviewing that, and it will be brought for council's consideration.
Great. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, I'm not seeing any others, so I think we'll just move on from that item and we'll move right to items for consideration. And since Councillor Burke identified a number of with regard to just pecuniary interest, I think we need to pull those out. That was, again, Councillor Burke, please indulge me, but I think that was A, B, C, and E.
Yes, 2A, B, C, and E.
Okay, so we'll pull those out to A, B, C, and E. Okay. Did anybody have others that they'd like to pull out for separate discussion? Go ahead, Sherry.
1B,
1B, that's the Rec Parks and Leisure Committee.
yes, please.
Okay,
4A, EDO reports. And 6A.
okay, 4A. 6A.
6A is with regards to the Arthur Township.
So
Works
the
here.
Operations Center design. Yep.
4A is the EDO report.
That's correct.
Councillor McCabe.
Yeah, Sherry beat me to the punch with a couple of them, but I'd like 6B as well, just the report on the Arthur wastewater treatment plant. Thank you.
Any other items anyone like to pull out for separate discussion?
No, I got them all.
Dan?
No, I'm good for now.
Okay, so we'll deal with the others then, all that's left. Have a recommendation here that all items listed under items for consideration on September 12th, 2022 council agenda, with the exception of those items identified for separate discussion, be approved and the recommendations therein be adopted. Can I get a mover and a seconder for that, please? Moved by Sherry, seconded by Steve. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. So we'll go back to 1B.
If I could just suggest procedurally, if you deal with all of the ones that Councillor Burke has declared a pecuniary interest in one motion, and then she can just not partake in that discussion.
Okay,
And then the rest you can deal with sort of one by one.
okay, so probably easier to deal with that first then. Okay, so we'll just jump to the items we pulled out because of the pecuniary interest. So that's 2A, 2B, 2C, and 2E. Does anybody else have any discussion that they'd like to make on those? So, okay, so how do you have, Karen, do you have how would we deal with the resolution for that?
You'll get a mover and seconder, and we will show in the minutes that Councillor Burke has declared her pecuniary interest and that she did not take part in the discussion, and then pass the resolution.
Okay. Okay, so just in order to dispense with those quickly, could I get a mover and a seconder to approve all of those in one motion, moved by Councillor McCabe, seconded by Councillor Yake. Any discussion on those? Okay, I'll call the motion. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. And we can welcome Councillor Burke back. And we will go back to 1B. And we have a couple of recommendations here. I'll go through them both. This is out of the Rec Parks and Leisure Committee from September 6th. First recommendation is the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Wellington North receive the minutes of the Recreation Parks and Leisure Committee meeting held on September 6th, 2022. Can I get a mover and a seconder for that, please? Moved by Steve, seconded by Lisa. Thank you. And we'll open the floor for discussion on that. Any discussion on that recommendation? Okay, then I'll call the motion on that one. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. We'll move to the second recommendation, and that it reads as follows: that the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Wellington North direct staff to proceed with a procurement process as detailed within the township policy for the renovation of the upper leisure hall at the Mount Forest and District Sports Complex at this time. And further, the council directs staff to utilize previously allocated municipal modernization and efficiency funds for this project. And further, that council authorize the director of operations or their designate to enter in an agreement for this project. Can I get a mover and a seconder for that, please? Moved by Sherry, seconded by Steve. And with that, I'll open the floor for questions or comments. I think maybe you might have some, Sherry.
I do. Thank you, Mayor Lennox. So I just have some questions with regards to this. With redeveloping the leisure hall into office space, I'm just questioning what the intent for the office space is. I know it notes that staff have concerns related to lack of physical space. I believe that's probably here in the Kenilworth office. But my question is later on, we're going to see that there is another venue that we're looking to build office space. And my question is with the trends and people working at home, how many people do we have working at home? And do we need this additional space? Is it intended solely for staff? Or are we looking at renting out some of this office space for startup businesses that maybe could use it as a hub for meetings and things like that? So I'm not exactly sure who wants to take on that question, and it is a lot, I know. But I'm just wondering what that space is going to be utilized for.
Matt, go ahead.
Yeah, through you, Mayor Lennox. The two office spaces that are planned for the upper leisure hall would be for potentially long-term for rec employees. We currently have a recreation employee admin person who's working out of the upper leisure hall. So this would kind of just formalize that space for them. And possibly there'd be someone moving from the Mount Forest wastewater treatment plant that's currently there and would take up the second office space. But there's also the opportunity that as rec potentially expands, the office space at the Mount Forest Sports Complex could be used as either a hoteling station or a permanent spot for someone in the future. That was kind of the thought process as it relates to establishing the two office spaces there. There hasn't been talk internally about renting it maybe, or offering it as an economic development incentive for maybe startups, but again, with the space there, that could certainly be an option in the future.
Okay, Darren.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Currently, Councillor Burke, we do have a few people working from home, but it's not full-time. They're 2 or 3 days a week, and the rest of the time they are in the office. We do have some positions that are vacant right now. and new positions that we're hiring for that we're short on office space for in Kenilworth. So this will give us the opportunity to shuffle some bodies around and make room. And with the proposed operations center, that would be a great space, but that's 2-3 years down the road. And the space in the Mount Forest Arena is a short-term ask.
Okay. Any other questions, comments? Go ahead, Sherry.
So I'm going to direct this question to Matt. So is the intent for the office space then to keep all of the recreation staff sort of together? I mean, I don't really think, to me, it doesn't make sense if we're going to put somebody from a different department in that building space. It would be easier for the folks that work in one department to collaborate together if they are all in one center. And will the entire leisure hall be converted, or is it just a section of? I do understand it's not rented a lot, but I just don't want to see that revenue potential be taken away either.
Go ahead, Matt.
Yep, through you, Mayor Lennox. So the design that's proposed would kind of be when you walk into the leisure hall, it would be sort of building the office spaces, I'll say off to the right. So the upper leisure hall will still be a rentable space. Those offices will allow us to lock the door in the evening, just so that space is secured overnight. And one of the people we're thinking of possibly moving over, the admin person who's currently working out of the Mount Forest and District Sports Complex kind of is a shared admin between recreation and roads. So one option is partnering that individual with, again, someone who has a development focus, but kind of has a roads background as well. So it would help that admin person, have rec and potentially roads available to them. But that's not to say that in the future it could be all recreation people. It just gives us some flexibility, and there is some immediate needs coming as it relates to physical space. So I think the thought really was to give some flexibility. I agree with you that long term, probably having recreation people in that space makes a lot of sense. But that's kind of where we're at, or what the current thought process is for that space.
Any other questions or comments in regard to this recommendation? Dan, go ahead.
Just in regards, I guess, to Councillor Burke's concerns, is there a possibility, or should we, or maybe we have looked at the whole office space issue within the municipality, where everybody's working, who's working from home, when they're coming back, and what we are, an inventory of what we have, and maybe moving forward with that. I don't know if there's been an assessment of our current office space needs, or where we are with that, maybe.
Brooke, do you want to tackle that one?
Through the chair, I think that from what I've heard, there is definitely an opportunity to look at some sort of space utilization study or policy. I'm not sure of all the work done to date, so I'll have to circle back with the staff here. But in this changing dynamic of people working from home, options for shared workspaces, and then just the nature of the township itself and the changing needs for delivery of services. It's always helpful to check in and look at what the municipality currently has and where the needs are going to be in the future, both for space and land. So I think that's something that we can take away and report back to council if that's desired.
Okay, thank you. Dan, go ahead.
And I'd like to see that. Now I know from a recreation committee point of view, we've been talking about this for some time, but maybe the issue has been raised here as to where, you know, maybe we need to just do a thorough assessment as to our, you know, the whole office space needs.
Okay. Steve?
I might just weigh in here a little bit too, because then there's the Damascus Public Work Yards as well. I think there's some space there that we could possibly use in the future as well. So that'd be an interesting study. It doesn't have to be 50 pages long or anything like that, but just an inventory of what we have, what we need, and where we can put it, I guess.
And probably needs to be forward looking a bit too, so that we are anticipating what the needs will be. So we're not, you know, addressing these on one-off basis every year or a few months or whatever the case may be. We need to take the long view on this as well, because we know our community is changing, the needs are going to change, and we have to be nimble to be able to accommodate that. So, any other questions or comments? Okay, call the motion then. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to. Just bear with me a minute. 6A, I guess it is, are we?
4A.
4A, sorry. Okay. Finally found where I needed to be. Okay, this is in regard to the EDO report from the Economic Development Office update. I have a recommendation here that the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Wellington North receive for information report EDO 2022-24 being an update from the Economic Development Office. Could I get a mover and a seconder for that, please? Moved by Sherry, seconded by Lisa. Thank you. And with that, I'll open the floor for questions or comments. Sherry, I think you were the one to ask for this one, so I'll give you first crack at it.
Thank you, Mayor. Always enjoy reading these report updates. I always think that there's such great information in there, and I always like to pull it just as more of an information piece. But it's always great to see partnerships evolve with these programs coming together, the Digital Main Street, Saugeen Connects. These programs continue to give our community the tools they need to thrive. Wowza is a great opportunity for anybody that has time to do that. And the BIA projects, it's nice to see that those are coming together. And as I say, it's just a whole wealth of information in there with the farmers market and the Wi-Fi in the BIA and Mount Forest as well. So I don't really have a question. I always just like to bring it forward just so that it sort of gets picked up, because I think there's a lot of very valuable information in there.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments? Lisa, go ahead.
Pretty similar to Sherry's comments. I do hear Dale's reports quite frequently as part of because I sit with the chambers, right, the BIA. So we do speak quite a bit. But yeah, there's some pretty good information in there. And I was really excited to read the statistics from the growth housing and development forums. So I kind of feel affirmed that, at least personally, and I think on the council, that we're on the right track. As far as the student startup program, and as I said this to Dale yesterday, I was really impressed by that soil sampling business that young gentleman started. And I asked Dale where I could hire him, and oh, look, Dale provide that information. So that was great. And going through this report as well, I just have to say, like, I am so proud of how our community is developing, and it looks better than ever. everywhere. And that's not just council. I mean, council's only a tiny part of that, but how well everyone's working together. It's just amazing how far I think it's gone. There's always work to do, of course, right? But yeah, I'm just really proud of that. I'm really proud of our community.
Okay, any other questions or comments? Okay, we'll call the motion then. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. We'll move on to 6A. This is in regard to the conceptual design for a new operations center. And I have a recommendation here that the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Wellington North receive report Ops 2022-23, being a report on the conceptual design of a new operations center in Arthur. And further, the council approve in principle the conceptual designs presented within this report. And further, the council directs staff to investigate and provide recommendations on purchasing a 5-acre parcel of land for the facility in the future, once the budget is approved. Could I get a mover and a seconder for that, please? Moved by Steve. Seconded by Dan. Okay, thank you. And we'll open the floor for discussion. Steve, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor, and through you. It was exciting to see the two different concepts here, and it's nice that we're moving on with this. I know we've been at it for probably about a year and a half or two since we went over to the Township of Mapleton to have a look at their garage, or sorry, the county's garage there at the same location as the Township of Mapleton. So nice to see this, and again, lots of space there for office and for future use. And I think hopefully we can even maybe get some of the wastewater treatment employees over in that side as well, if need be. I know they're crowded down there as well. But yeah, if money was no object, I really quite like option 2. Just voicing my opinion, but nice to see this moving forward again.
Okay. Other questions or comments? Sherry, go ahead.
So I too am glad to see that this is moving forward. It's been long needed within Arthur. We all know what the works yard looks like. Just a couple of questions again with concern to location and the concept. The concept again has a lot of office space, and I would be more supportive of that space once we sort of had an inventory of our future needs and our current needs for space. And also wondered if the current location couldn't be utilized instead of trying to go out and purchase 5 acres of land.
Okay. Matt, do you want to tackle that one?
Yep, yeah, through you, Mayor. Township staff and the architect did look at the current property, and just the size of it would be a challenge for the type of facility or the size of facility that we're projecting. The 2 options that are before you, that's just to give the township flexibility when it goes to make a land purchase. From an operations standpoint, and I think from a township standpoint, like in recreation, we're going to need land in Arthur in order to be able to deliver on future projects. So the team is currently working on putting together a report that'll be similar to this to try to give an amount of land that we need, and similarly for the Arthur Water Tower and the new Arthur Well, we're going to need land. So this report really is just to kind of put in an amount of area that we need in order to build something that we think kind of prepares us for the next 20 to 40 years. To Councillor McCabe's earlier point, the intent would be that the 4 drinking water team members that are currently housed in sort of one office at the Arthur wastewater treatment plant would be relocated to the operations center. What we found when we constructed Arthur wastewater treatment plant phase 1 is a lot of the electrical and technology that was implemented took up additional space. So we actually, over the project, lost some what used to be space. It's now filled with either electrical or it's filled with, telecommunications. So I think, I think the water team at some point is going to need a new home. And certainly part of what you're seeing there would be the intent of putting the water team over there and giving them a truck bay to use for their equipment storage and the like, as well, probably long-term, the transportation services manager, potentially a road supervisor, and either the roads team or the roads lead hand, could all use office space. There's 8 offices shown in this design, but they can be split into 2-person offices long-term. So that gives us just some additional capacity long-term is sort of the intent of what's before you.
Okay, other questions or comments?
Oh,
Steve?
sorry, just when Councillor Burke was talking just about the existing public works yard there. Just a thought that for future use of that area, maybe Wellington North Power could move into that, because I know the building that they have on Isabella is quite tiny, and it's, they can't even hardly park there. And yeah, that might be an area for Wellington North Power to move from Isabella out of the downtown area, so to speak, and the residential area to a spot that's for now on the edge of the town of Arthur. Just something to think about as well.
Dan, go ahead.
I guess, just in regards to each concept, we see eight offices in each one, which is good. And 2 workstations in each one. Is that an accurate scenario, that there might be 2 in 1 or 2 in 4, whatever the case may be? I mean, that certainly provides additional space too.
Matt, can you comment on that?
Yep, yeah, through you, Mayor, to Councillor Yeek. Yeah, the intent is that those offices, they could serve as a single office, but long-term, they would be built big enough that there could be 2 people kind of housed back to back in each of them. So it could handle up to 16 offices. It's possible that there'd be a SCADA office, like one of the offices would be used for the water SCADA system that's currently at the Arthur wastewater treatment plant. It would just give us as a township more flexibility to grow.
Sure. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions, comments? I just have a couple of questions, and I think probably Matt, I'll direct them at you. One is with regard to, we've had a fair amount of discussion around the office space, but the equipment space, I'm also interested in learning a bit more about. So I was just wondering if you could comment in general terms for both the office and equipment space, how this concept relates to our current needs today and what we anticipate will be needed for the future. And also, does this anticipate reduction in use of some of our other facilities as well, or is this strictly for the Arthur Village needs at this time? I'm just looking for kind of a general vision of where you think we need to go with this.
Yep. Yeah, thanks, Mayor Lennox. With the truck bays that are shown, again, 1 truck bay would kind of be dedicated to the water team. The talk has been that potentially a grader from Luther would end up being located in this location. And as well, this would serve, so right now what happens is things like the sweeper in Mount Forest gets stored outside or gets stored in the shed over the winter. But this location would serve as sort of summer and winter storage of equipment that's sort of off-season equipment. So it would allow us to store everything we have in Arthur today. And probably it would allow us to transition some of the equipment we have in Luther here, but also be used as a storage area and allow us to get some of our equipment that currently gets stored outside to be stored inside. Like our pickups in Arthur get stored outside a lot of the time. It would just give us that flexibility and allow us to grow. Also not shown, well, I guess it kind of suggests it, but over top of the office space would be a mezzanine. Right now, the water department stores material in Arthur at the Wellington North Power Building in the second floor. So this would allow us to bring that material over to be stored in Arthur. And it would also allow us to have kind of a bit of a storage room similar to what we have in Kenilworth, sort of near the back where Dale's office is, sort of lower, but just sort of a stores room where we could have signs, we could have a lot of that material that right now we have sort of stored in piecemeal locations.
Okay, and I saw your hand, Steve. I'll come back to you, but I had one more I was gonna ask Matt first, and that's there's a couple of different concepts here on the report. Do the staff that are going to use this on a daily basis have input into what this should look like? I'd be willing to take their advice on what the building should look like to facilitate their needs as well. So just if you could comment on that, that'd be great.
Yep, thanks, Mayor Lennox. Yeah, to date, it's really been Dale, Clark, Corey, and myself who've been involved with the architect. Certainly coming out of this, there's time to share it with everyone. It really piggybacks on what we see in Mapleton as it relates to kind of a facility. And I know the team generally knows what the facility's like in Mapleton. But what's before you as far as the council reports haven't been shared broadly with staff members. So that's something that I could take away as a follow-up following this meeting to make sure, to your point, that it meets kind of their intent or their need.
And I guess the question is, there's a couple of different options here. Do we need to be selecting a preferred option at this point, or are we just accepting these as general concepts and that'll move us to the next stage? Go ahead, Matt.
The intent is just general concepts, no selection needed, and really to provide as much flexibility in the future as possible to when we get to a point where we're actually looking for site locations, to give us some flexibility and options. It's really just like an in principle, functionally, these make sense, or these are these make sense. And there's still lots of work to be done to get us to a point where we have a parcel of land that we can actually lay out this on, and that's something that comes after probably additional township land consideration needs are considered around council's table.
Okay, thank you. Steve, I'll come back to you now.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Lennox. And you asked the question that I was going to, just on what we have done for staff input. So thank you for that.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Okay. Oh, Sherry, sorry.
So if I understand correctly, we are looking for approval, not on any particular concept, but the process to move forward to build a work center in Arthur. Would that be accurate?
Pat, go ahead.
Yep, through you, Mayor. I think the next step, Councillor Burke, would just be that this endorsement kind of gets parked until some of the other land needs in the township are endorsed. And at a later date, once more of the land needs for the township are understood, it'd be brought to council for a budget item consideration about purchasing land to move forward. This would just kind of in hand, we would have, this is a conceptual design of what we want the operations center to look like. But until we have some of those other pieces fall into place related to land needs, there really wouldn't be further action on this project. But I think staff are hopeful that in the next 6 months, we have some of those conversations with council about other land needs to get us to, you know, a size or a parcel of land that would make sense for future township needs.
Okay, thank you, Matt. Yeah, I'd just like to say I'm generally supportive of the concept, with the exception of the additional floor space for office space until we know exactly what kind of need we need for that kind of space. Once we do the inventory, I guess we'll have a better understanding. Thank you, Matt.
I think just if I'm understanding the process here correctly, just for clarification, we need to look at these conceptual designs to decide how much land is needed to accommodate this. The design could change. And you know, if we had less offices, I don't think that's going to change the amount of land needed significantly, because I think it's the equipment storage and salt and sand storage and those types of things that are really going to require the larger amounts of land. So I think this just gives us gives staff an excellent way to budget for our land needs as we look forward. So, you know, I'm sure there will be lots of discussion before we get to what the building finally looks like. So I just, if you can just verify, Matt, that's kind of where we are in the process, is that we just need to make sure how much land we needed before we can move on that.
Correct, Mayor Lennox.
Okay. Thank you. Darren?
Yeah, just to further expand, this is probably the first in a series of reports on things like this. Staff have been working in the background on a review of facilities and staffing space. So some of this council input is needed to kind of bring the greater picture together. So yeah, for council, you can look to see more of these type of reports, and hopefully as we go along, the picture gets more clear.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Okay, I'll call a motion. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. We'll move on to 6B. This is the annual Arthur Wastewater Treatment Plant report. And a recommendation here that the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Wellington North receive report Ops 2022-23, being a report on the 2021-2022 annual performance report of the Arthur Wastewater Treatment Plant. And further, the council direct staff to publish the report on the township's website. Could I get a mover and a seconder for that, please? Moved by Steve, seconded by Sherry. And with that, I'll open the floor for discussion. Steve, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor Lennox, and through you. No, I just wanted, the report's fantastic, and I like to see that it was 100% compliant with our ECA. And just had one quick question. I think I kind of know the answer, Matt, but in the background, the very last couple of words there says the wastewater treatment plant experienced no bypasses. Can you just elaborate on that a wee bit? As in, like, what that means. Yeah, thanks.
Go ahead, Matt.
Yep, yeah, through you, Mayor Lennox, to Councillor McCabe. So a bypass would be if process water or sewage would not have went through the full treatment train. So if you think of the treatment plant as 6 different processes, obviously if raw sewage was to get into the environment, that would be considered a bypass. But also if it got through 5 of the treatment trains and it was to be discharged into the environment, maybe without going through the sand filter or without going through the UV process, that would also be considered a bypass from the ministry standpoint. Yeah, fortunately, since the upgrade, the equalization tank that was built as part of phase 1 gives us a lot more flexibility to handle significant weather events, and kind of that was an area where in the past, if we were talking 5 years ago, there were occasions where we would experience a bypass during a heavy rain event. But with that equalization tank, we're able to weather the storm in literal terms a lot better than we used to be able to. And but yeah, that's what a bypass is. A bypass is basically that sewage that came into the plant didn't make its way through all of the processes that it needed to in order to meet the intent of our ECA and get treated appropriately before it gets discharged into the Conestoga River in Arthur's case.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions, comments? I would just add that I sure like the summaries in those reports. There's a lot of technical data in there, and it's pretty heavy reading. And so thanks for the summaries in there, so that we don't have to be quite as technical as we need to file for the Ministry of Environment. So, and this is another good news story. So thanks a lot for that. Any other questions or comments? All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. I think that brings us to the end of our items for consideration. So we'll move on to any notice of motion this afternoon. Seeing none, we'll move on to community group meeting program report. Anybody have anything they'd like to report on today? Sherry, go ahead.
So I would just like to remind council and our residents that the Mount Forest Aquatics Ad Hoc Committee, this event for the You've Been Flocked, will start September the 18th and run till October the 2nd. So get your form ready and flock one of your neighbors, family, friends, boss, and they can be dropped off at the 88.7 The River. And also in Dale's report, but just want to remind everyone that the BIA downtown parkette beside the BMO Bank in Mount Forest, the grand opening is September the 30th, and it's noon to 1:30.
Great. Thank you for that, Sherry. Did I see your hand up, Steve?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
And through you, thank you. And through you, I just wanted to do a big shout out to all the volunteers from the Arthur Ag Society. The Arthur Fall Fair was fantastic. The kickoff on Thursday night at the roast beef dinner was close to, I believe, between 600 and 700 people, and it takes an army of volunteers to make that happen, and it takes another army of volunteers to keep the fair running as well as it did on Saturday and on Sunday again. And the weather even participated as well, which was great. And yeah, it was a great turnout. And just wanted to give them a great big shout out, because without them, it can't be done.
Okay. Thanks, Steve. Anybody else have anything they'd like to report on today? Okay, so we'll move on from there to bylaws. Wait a second here. Okay, so a recommendation here with regard to bylaws. The bylaw number 103-22 and 104-22 be read a first, second, and third time and enacted. Can I get a mover and a seconder for that, please? Moved by Sherry, seconded by Steve. Any discussion on any of those bylaws? Okay, all those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Move on to our cultural moment. And our cultural moment for today is about H. Gordon Green. So H. Gordon Green was perhaps Wellington North's most famous personality. In the prime of his career in the 1960s and 1970s, he was one of the better known journalists and radio commentators in Canada. Green was a native of Arthur Township, where he was born in 1912 as the eldest of 8 children. Coming of age during the Depression, he took on a number of jobs, including farmhand at 50 cents a day, country school teacher, and door-to-door salesman. Green was destined to become a writer and enrolled in journalism at the University of Michigan, where he sold his first story to the Toronto Star Weekly for $50. This was big money for the late 1930s. His childhood as an impoverished farm boy and experience with marginal employment opportunities had left an impression. After a brief stint at McGill studying medicine, he joined the Army. Following his service, he joined the staff of the Montreal Star. He was assigned to the Family Herald, the Star's weekly farm magazine that at that time was a fixture in nearly every rural and small town household. Even though he was still in his 30s, Green had developed a down-home writing style that made reference to his experience in the 1920s and 1930s. He became editor and held the position for almost 20 years. As time passed, he became something of a celebrity, a role he enjoyed immensely. By the 1950s, he appeared frequently on various CBC radio programs as a commentator and panelist. Green's radio career evolved into a short syndicated commentary that was heard over dozens of radio stations in Canada. He became known as radio's old cynic, which suited his style. In the 1960s, he became engaged in politics and in 1962 accepted the nomination as the New Democratic Party candidate in the riding of Wellington North. Although broadly supported and pulling in the largest vote ever for the NDP, he only managed a third place showing. H. Gordon Green published a number of books, including Professor Go Home and A Time to Pass Over. He continued to write a column for the Star until his death of cancer in 1991. His last column appeared the day before he died. Thousands mourned his death. Fellow Arthurite MPP Ted Arnott delivered a tribute in the Ontario legislature. This is submitted by James Taylor, Wellington North Cultural Roundtable. That's your cultural moment for September. And with that, we'll move to our confirming bylaw. And I have a recommendation that bylaw number 105-22, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Wellington North at its regular meeting held on September 12th, 2022, be read a first, second, and third time and enacted. Can I get a mover and a seconder for that, please? Moved by Sherry, seconded by Steve. Thank you. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. And we'll move to adjournment. And the recommendation is that the regular council meeting of September 12th, 2022 be adjourned at 3:17 p.m. Could I get a mover and a seconder for that, please? Moved by Lisa, seconded by Dan. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. And well, I should have done it probably before we're officially adjourned to just draw your attention to the meetings, notices, and announcements. Mount Forest BIA is meeting tomorrow at 8 a.m. The Ad Hoc Advisory Committee tomorrow at 7 p.m. The Chamber of Commerce tomorrow at 7 p.m. And the Arthur BIA is meeting via video conferencing on Wednesday at 7:30 p.m. Remember the volunteer and newcomer celebration scheduled for Friday, September 23rd from 11 to 1. And Wellington North Culture Days are coming up September 23rd to October 16th. And our next council meeting will be Monday, September 26th, and Rec Parks and Leisure Committee, October 4th, and October 11th would be our next meeting following that. So thank you, everyone, and I hope you have a great day.
See you, everybody.
Thanks. Have a good week.